Welcome to Art and Scroll Studio. We celebrate the makers and creators of Judaica art. Every episode, we feature a different artist in presentation and conversation. Here we present Karen Kassap, who was our special guest on April 17th, 2024. Please subscribe to our channel so you'll be sure to know when we have events coming in the future or watch episodes that have happened in the past. What follows is the complete episode as it appeared on April 17th, 2024. Karen Kassap is a collage artist living in Woodbridge, Connecticut. She has always been a student of art history and engaged in creative arts, as diverse as knitting, crocheting, sewing, weaving, photography, drawing, painting, pottery, and collage. Studying with Debbie Pendell in the beginning of the 2000s was a turning point in her work. She credits the evolution of her work into its present style to the teaching and support of her mentor and to her love of art to her parents, of blessed memory. Karen creates all the materials used in the final pieces to express her creative, personal, and political interests. Her work is a deeply personal expression of her identity as a woman, a mother, a wife, and a Jew. She is a member of the Jewish Art Salon, the American Guild of Judaic Art, a Hopper Prize finalist 2021, and was featured in the Forward newspaper in that same year. When she is not in her studio, she volunteers on the advisory board of Apostle Immigrant Services in New Haven and works as a facilitator for the ADL Words to Action program. She co-manages her synagogue gift shop and has been the Tuesday Minyan captain at her synagogue for more than 12 years. When I think of Karen's work, I think of an orchestra. Her art works as sections do in an orchestra. The different sections all come together to create a unified whole. The paper is layered as the first level. The images and the collage elements go on top. Next comes drawings and other images that she brings to it. Then comes the text. And all combine to communicate a message about life, about repairing the world, and about hope. And with that, I want to say, welcome, Karen. There you are.
Thank you for welcoming me.
I'm so happy to have you here. I'm so happy to see you and to see me, and we're both together. That's a good thing. So, Karen, before we get started in looking at the work, I want to ask you a few questions, as I always do. And the first question I want to ask you is, did you always want to be an artist?
That's such a great question, Shelley. um, I always knew that being creative and doing something artistic would be part of my life. And whether it was to call myself an artist or to call myself an embroiderer, a knitter, a photographer, all of those things were my interests. And I'm very lucky at this time in my life to be able to put all my effort into being creative. So it was always there, and now it's at the front.
Were you encouraged to be an artist in your family home?
Um, there was a lot of creative things that went on in my family home. Both my parents were extremely creative people. My mother was a trained painter, and my father was a master calligrapher, weaver, and his profession was an engineer, clockmaker. So having a life that was full of being creative was encouraged. Absolutely.
That's wonderful. So they never said to you, put that brush down and become an accountant.
They said, go to law school or medical school so you can support yourself.
They did. Well, then that makes them normal people. But I'm glad to hear you were encouraged in all those interests. Tell me a bit about what some of those interests were, because you mentioned knitting. What other things did you get involved in?
I'm still a very avid knitter. I love to do that. I've learned how to weave a little bit, and I do that sometimes. I like to touch clay. I draw. I studied photography, like with the teacher. And I did some gum bichrome printing because I'm always interested in the origins of things. So a lot of my interest in collage also is about looking to the origins of of the creative process.
Okay, very, very interesting setup then for me to ask you, when when did you turn to your Judaism or your Judaic background to begin to integrate that into your work?
That's a really good question. I think my Judaism is a really important part of my identity, but as I've gotten older, once I began parenting, it took a more significant position in my creative process, but it was always there.
All right, that sounds like a very good beginning and a good way for us to start. So I'm going to begin the share screen. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's begin. So what we're looking at here, it looks like some photography. Can you tell me, was this part of your early process?
Yes, very early. I was in high school when the picture on the left is my sister when she was quite young. And that was my first uh, efforts at black and white photography. It's in the olden days when we used actual film and paper and darkroom and chemicals. And that wasn't primitive enough for me. And I learned how to do gum bichromate printing. This is a cyanotype in the middle. And then when I didn't have access to all those chemicals and rooms, I became interested in creating something from other materials. And so you can see a long time ago, 57, 54, a little Happy New Year card.
And that was something that you cut out and pasted. That was an early collage.
Very early collage, yes.
So now we're looking at something that was part of your formative years in terms of your artistic development. Tell us about that.
So I was always interested in collage and became a greater interest. And I took a class with the woman who has the little heart above her head, Debbie Pendle, who's a wonderful collage artist in her own right, and also one of the most amazing teachers I've ever encountered. And I learned so much about her, not just about art, but about life and looking and thinking. And um, I can only say that she opened me up to my own creativity in ways I never even imagined. But significantly in relation to collage, I had been like going through magazines and cutting up materials, and she was very much an advocate of creating your own materials. And that process of creating materials is a very important part of my creative process. And so I have some examples on that slide. You can see like paper. I take paper and paint on it and mark it up and use it.
Awesome. So now we're going to start looking at some of your work. And is this one of your earlier pieces?
Yeah. So before I was completely liberated, I still needed to have some confines to my exploration of my ideas and my process. And I limited myself to a palette of black and white, kind of relying on the things that I felt comfortable with, like with black and white photography. So for more than a year, I really continuously worked on black and white collage. I mean, there's so much black and white. It's not just black and white, it's all the shades of gray in between. And that's can be really challenging and exciting and interesting.
And
And this was my series that had to do with sharp objects.
yes, I know we're going to see some themes repeating themselves. And but I find this interesting where you have the numbers showing on that scissors. Are those numbers that you drew on, or was that on the on a photograph of a tape measure?
That is the Xerox, a tape measure. So almost everything I use, I've somehow created. Photographs usually are my own photographs, and then I Xerox them. But the tape measure is like such a great image. So I enlarged it on the Xerox machine many times and then used that as my source.
So now we have an explosion of color. So this is where you went to after the black and white. What was your thinking when you started exploring? And I want you to speak a little bit because I did not talk about the needles and the domestic items in the previous piece. So I'm going to have you talk about that here. And the eggs. Talk about the
Yeah.
eggs.
All of these works I started when I was parenting young children, and I enjoyed all of the young years, but my time was largely filled with a lot of domestic chores, including cooking and mending and all the arts that are usually associated with women's arts. And there's that dynamic edge, that you love them and you hate them. All those chores can pile up, but they bring out so many beautiful, joyous moments. And like the one on the left, like a Shabbat dinner that, can take you forever to cook and clean up. And, you know, you can feel the joy of everyone being together as well. Similarly, the figure on the right has scissors in her hands and the needles. And it's, I try to present that dichotomy of a domestic life, the joy and the difficulties.
The push and the pull. I thought when you said you love them and you hate them, you were referring to the children because that's
I only love
what I
my
would have said,
children. I only love them.
of course. Talk about your journey into some of the parshiot or the Judaic aspects of what I'm looking at here.
So these are images that I made. Wanted to celebrate women and Jewish holidays. So on the right is an image of a female figure. It's supposed to be female with the moon. So that's Rosh Chodesh, the holiday celebrating the new moon, which is traditionally associated with women because of our lunar menstruals and our connection to the moon. And then for me, that was just a joyous moment to depict that. And also, there's the idea of women leading leading prayer. The figure is wearing a talit, which is also a little bit radical. And then I have my Rosh Hashanah queen on the left, carrying the pomegranate because the holiday meals, the great pleasure they bring and the joy are still a lot of work.
I'm glad you present that because someone needs to speak to that, and it is a lot of work, but there is a lot of joy, and she's definitely uh, working hard
She found the biggest pomegranate that she could.
and followed that up with the giant turkey or chicken.
Yes, so this is irony. I call this picture rest because it harkens back to something, I feel like not just for me, but for many people who are doing something creative that we have experiences when we're younger that stick with us. And I had a friend when I was, in my early 20s, and she was more religiously observant. She told me about how at her home, the Shabbat dinner just magically appeared every Friday night. And I thought, you mean your mother schlepped and schlepped until you had this beautiful dinner? And obviously, your mother did it with grace and quiet, and they just thought it magically appeared. I just feel connected to the chicken.
Well, I think it makes an interesting statement, especially with this. There's a kind of head that's falling off here. Is that the exhausted mother?
It could be.
And that is such an artist answer. I just want to tell you that is just an artist, very much an artist answer. Sometimes when I ask my sister, who is also an artist, if something means something, she'll say, okay. So let's go with that. But I do want to ask you a bit about process because when you make your own papers, and I'm going to assume some of this is papers you've made, are you planning a finished item or do you go into making the piece and then start rummaging around of what you've already made? So how much pre-planning is it when you do the preparation of the papers?
So, in general, I have a large supply of paper, and I would say to think of it as like for a painter, they have their tubes of paint, or they open or the paint on the palette and mix it up. For me, the paper is like that. It's my palette. However, that said, sometimes I have an idea and I want to do something, and I look through my paper and I'm like, oh, it's not definitely not the paper colors or shapes or whatever that I'm looking for. And then I will make paper. And lastly, when I was talking about paper as part of the process, sometimes if you're just stuck or not sure what to do next, or the process of making the paper is creative. And sometimes that can just be stimulating. Like you can be doing something that's not necessarily towards the end product yet, but it's the path, it's the journey there.
I have to say this piece also expresses one of the things that I love about your work, which is the integration of patterning that you have going around here. And I'm going to imagine that you did you plan this, that you were going to have a platter that had a pattern, or did it come to you after you did the piece?
Um, I knew the chicken was going to be on a platter, and I do like the detail, and that's always often a part of my work, some kind of detail. Like in this case, it's the design. Later, I use more lettering as part of my detail pattern, and I like that. It just feels good.
So now it looks like you are somewhere else. Where are you here?
So this is a picture on the left of the Cloisters Museum. It's part of the Metropolitan Museum in New York. Um, and these are some medieval manuscripts that I'm put up as an example of the kind of thing I used to love to go when to the cloisters and look at the artwork, and it was an informative part of my childhood. And those kind of images also, and then also, as I was saying earlier, my father was a calligrapher, and his interest in this kind of thing was also interesting to me. So these were the medieval period. It came to mind very immediately when we had the beginning of COVID, and the world felt like it was medieval. So that was kind of something that a reference point that made sense to me.
And is this piece here, the Black Wedding, is this part of your medieval kind of inspiration based
Yes.
piece?
So when we were all quarantining and worrying about what was going to happen and listening to crazy stuff on the news, and this kind of fear and not of something that we didn't understand, even though we were in the 21st century. Um, so many things harken back to, our most primitive and frightened selves. So I had read about something called the Black Wedding, which was like a plague wedding. That was a Jewish tradition that began maybe in the late 1800s. This in Eastern Europe, an idea that there was some kind of offering of marrying a couple in a cemetery, and that it would somehow free us from the plague. In fact, during the Spanish flu in 1918, there are newspaper articles that in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, maybe New York also, uh, you know, the unmarriageable was how it was described. Maybe people who were um, had some disabilities or might not otherwise have found a spouse were encouraged to marry in the cemetery, and that this would free us from the plague. So I don't know, some things, sometimes I just get a picture in my head. So clearly this came to me. I knew I needed a monster holding up the chuppah on one side, and you can see the figures standing on grass, something green with bare feet. This was part of the symbolism of middle age paintings. There was a lot of symbolism about religion. So, like bare feet meant you were on holy ground. The chuppahs from our tradition, and then I wanted something hopeful on the left. That's what the flowers are about. And at the very bottom, I don't know if you can really see, but there's the Tav Nun Sadi, which is Tenutzva, it's the expression, it's the Hebrew words, the first letter of all the Hebrew words that are put on headstones, and it means that your soul should be bound up in the bonds of life. So that's what
So
that
this now, am I looking at a study here or a detail
that where your cursor is a detail.
of this piece here?
Yes.
So it looks like there's text involved here. Am I correct? Is this some sort of text that has been cut
No,
up
I think that's just weird.
texture?
It's textured paper. It's actually like I took fabric and Xeroxed it. So it's paper that
Beautiful.
looks like it's woven.
Very beautiful.
Yeah.
Because, at the same time as looking horrific, it looks joyful. So I think that's a big part of your work. I think you can try and be heavy-handed, but I actually think that your personal joy does come through.
I
Try
hope
harder,
it
Karen. Try
does.
harder. And so now we're looking at a triptych. So what inspired you to do this? Because we're going to look at a few details in a minute, but talk to me about your inspiration for this.
Well, this was also part of my COVID reaction, COVID series. At least here in the US, we had some terrible gun violence going on. There was the murder of George Floyd and just a lot of pent up anger and racism and prejudice. And there was just a lot of crazy, and it was really upsetting. And I wanted to address it somehow. So I decided to do a triptych. The central panel is sort of giving you the idea of like a headstone, and that each piece has like a rectangle on the top that's sort of meant to be the descriptor, and then beneath the more of the story. So on the left, do not kill, the sixth commandment. Um, I wanted to show the agony, and from all of my looking at art history and art, the Masaccio expulsion from Eden has always been a really strong image for me. So I relied on that to help explain how I was feeling. And then there are all the demons, because I feel like we all have the demons within us. There's the Yetzer Hara, the Yetzer Tov, the good inclination, the bad inclination. It's always in conflict in all of us, and that's what those little monsters are.
Yeah, I've
And then
just I've just moved on to some of your inspiration, but I'm going to come back to the details in a second. Can
sure.
you speak to one more minute about why we have these here to show your inspiration for this piece?
Well, the Delacroix, the fist, um, the people. I was feeling like I was looking for historical work that expressed the kind of emotions I was feeling. And it's something I like to do, look to work that I know and bring it to into my own vocabulary.
So here's the fist, the raised fist here, and
Yes,
here's the demons,
yes,
and it's all beautifully brought together. Now here's some text. Now, um, is this typing that you did? Did you type this out?
yes. I have an old typewriter.
Nicely done. So this is a bat mitzvah project.
Well, the day before quarantine began, I went to a bat mitzvah of twin girls that I have great affection for, and their parsha was Ki Tisa. Um, and that was really the beginning of everything for us in terms of how COVID unfolded. And ironically, or in as an omen, the story of Kitisa is about the golden calf. And when Moses comes down and sees the golden calf and then slams down the tablets and then has to go back up and get him again. In the Torah, it states that God sent a plague down on the Jewish people. So it definitely felt like it was an omen.
Felt
And
biblical.
that's an issue. And that's something I think about too, that we need to pay attention more. So in this image, I have the girls who were just so wonderful, and I felt so sorry that their whole bat mitzvah got changed. Not everyone didn't come, things like that. And the little, I made my own symbolism. The dots on the top are sort of the impending disease. The flowers shapes at the bottom are sort of lung shaped flowers. And a technique that's also like in that early period of painting where the patron looks in. That's me or some artist or somebody peeking in on them at the top, um, witnessing what's happening.
Beautiful. A thought occurs to me here when I see the lines of it, looks of it like your paintbrush here. And it occurs to me, did you paint at all do you ever paint the under level, the bottom level, the paper? Do you ever put on paint first?
I usually don't put paint first, but I definitely do put paint on top. And certainly, if I don't like something, the beauty of collage is you can just put another layer on.
Way it goes.
Um,
Yeah.
this piece, uh, was like paper that had something where the text of the Torah is. I was paper that had something else on it once, and then I painted over it. So there was a paper there before. Yeah.
Now we come to some more inspiration for you. What are these books?
So as I had said, I'm interested in the calligraphy in the Middle Ages and the kind of use of that to illustrate and narrate. A lot of most people didn't read and write in the Middle Ages, and so for Christianity to express its stories, there was always an illustration to help you understand. And these are very small books called Books of Hours. They were meant for women and men to carry around with them and keep their minds on appropriate things, prayerful and righteous. And the idea of it was inspiring to me because they're mainly, as far as I know, they're always Christian prayers or Christian orientation. And I wanted to make something like that for women. So I looked and looked, and then I found that there is a tradition called techinas, which are, it's a Yiddish word meaning like spiritual prayers that women wrote for themselves or were written for them, and sometimes men wrote them, and they're they can be quite beautiful
And
and inspiring.
I know this book had a big impact on you, and you took a lot of
Yeah.
inspiration from it. So are
Yes,
these,
that woman Fanny Nuda did a beautiful job.
and she wrote these poems.
She was a rabbi's daughter, and she wrote these beautiful prayers, and they were very popular in the 1860s, all the way up until right before World War II, when that kind of thing wasn't really accessible anymore. And Dina Berlin retranslated them and did a beautiful preface, a very spiritual preface.
So this piece is based on the poem that we're looking at, this Building a Life.
Yes. Um, there's just a lot of words that she used. They're much longer than what I have excerpted here, but sometimes I just find her frankness about life and being a committed spiritual person, but also questioning and confronting God and the role that women play, embracing it. I feel a connection to that way of thinking.
So this is one of my favorite pieces, and I think the first piece I ever saw of yours that I fell madly in love with because of so much. There's so much going on here that you could look at it for a long time. And in fact, in the next slide, we will look at some of the details. But tell me what inspired you. What were you thinking when you drew those hands? And why did you call it Bride on Her Wedding Day?
Well, I love that her prayer for a bride on her wedding day acknowledges the difficulty of what you're entering into. That even though it's a holy and beautiful gift, that it's also an uneven and difficult road. And so the hands touching, I always feel like I'm always drawn to hands as a symbol. And the hands touching like that, I think, are tender and, it's erotic without being obvious. And then the words, I had visited Morocco, and the art in Morocco is very, it uses a lot of the text, the Arabic text on the walls there, you see the inspiration. So I incorporated that because I thought it was so amazing and beautiful.
What about the patterning I'm looking at here? Is that something that is that stamping or
Yes.
is it, yes, so it's now did you make these stamps?
No, I didn't make them. They're commercially made, but I stamped them.
I love it. I love the fact that you have so many creative ways to um, make a piece come alive. And, just like the orchestra, I mean, you've got these undertones and, your eye is drawn to different areas and that you're so creative in terms of what you bring to the piece. And like in here, there's a little bit of patterning that you made, I'm going to
Yes.
imagine.
Yes, I made that. Yeah.
Love it.
Thank you.
So this is another piece. Tell us about why you're intrigued with this little part of the prayer.
Well, that's, as I was saying, something that she does in her writing is to, accuse God of not always being fair and nice to us. So that part that's highlighted, this is a prayer for healing. All of her prayers are in a very traditional prayer format, with a little introduction and thank you, we love you. And by the way, you who injure and then bind up injuries, you who wound and then heal again, you've brought a serious illness upon me. It's like, where else could this have come from? But there's that turn to her, understanding that these things aren't in our control and we can be faithful and do our best to get better, but it feels good to vent a little. And I admire that she was able to say that.
Yeah, it's definitely shows a certain sense of bravery and courage that she,
Absolutely, especially a woman at that time, even though
yeah.
she was very well educated. Her father was a rabbi, her husband, who died early, was a rabbi, but she was quite wise herself.
So this is something that you've done to celebrate Chag Purim, I take it. And the question I have is this reference still from Fanny's book, or this is a different piece?
The text that's there is a prayer that she wrote in honor of Esther and women being a woman being the heroine, choosing a woman to be the heroine. And this was just fun to do because of all the little whimsical, the little creatures aren't as scary and demonic as I often look for. They were more humorous and gentle. And so that's what that is.
Well, it does say jubilation and joy. So I think you're inviting people to think about Purim as we do, which is, that you should drink ad shelo yada. You should drink until you don't know any better or different. So I think you've got really created a nice balance here between, what was really a serious situation with this woman who was brave and of course, you've got her name here with these lovely, lovely patterning details happening here. And I just would love to be a fly on the wall of your studio where you go, I know what I should do because, you have so much spontaneity that comes through in the work. And it looks like you might have had an idea and then this is what finally came about. Would I be right about that?
I think you're very much right. And you're welcome to come visit. I don't know if I'll be so interesting to watch me, but
Oh, I think it would. Um, Talk to me about patience and strength and adversity.
yeah, that was also a beautiful a really beautiful prayer that she wrote. And sometimes I find just I sometimes I need to be reminded, but when I am, that the natural world is can be such a respite from everything else that's going on. And when there's adversity and difficulty in your life, to take that moment to appreciate the beauty of nature. So I sometimes my work is based on a photograph. So I do still photograph, and I don't, but I photograph to use the images later. So I was in Sweden, and there had this beautiful yellow field with a blue sky, and it was just breathtaking. And I do find open landscape, whether it's lush or dry, a kind of a spiritual feeling there. So this was a big open place, and I took that photograph and turned it into this.
I just want to
And
draw, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I want to draw people's attention to the incredibly intricate and beautiful little line drawings that you can see surrounding the image here, and sort of the very lush calligraphy that's happening that's framing the piece. I think it's such a great combination of your purposeful illustration and then almost the spontaneity of the torn pieces that are assembled there. So is this one of Fanny's as well?
Yes, yes, this is. So she wrote this. There was a prayer besides this one that's existed before about when you enter a sanctuary or a synagogue. But she wrote this, and I went to visit a beautiful environment. I was, and I thought, I feel like that here. Like I don't need to be in a building to feel that a holy, silent dwelling place. Those are her words, and that kind of beautiful, hallowed space. So I made this collage with the houses that could be houses of worship or whatever that aren't exactly standing independently. They're kind of part of the background. So, but that's how I feel when I go somewhere that's just so naturally beautiful.
So now we're entering into your Shabbat series. It's going to be a challah adventure. So tell us about challah and
So
how
I
you.
love challah, and I love making it, and I love Shabbat. So this is a very, happy, peaceful, easy Shabbat. But since October 7th, many women, especially, got busy baking challah because of the ritual of hafreshat challah, which is the taking of challah as a sacrifice. If you make a large enough amount, you take a little piece and offer it as a burnt offering. And the idea behind it, though, is that it's a special moment that the person who's doing that has the ear of God just a little bit more than ordinarily. And I there's a whole thing about this if you're interested. Happy to direct people that people are making these halot large numbers and saying the names of the hostages in that were captured and that are who knows where in Gaza, or the names of soldiers who need prayers for healing, and like just saying their names. So I started making challah, and I started making art related to challah. I felt like the one on the left I did first, and it was that peaceful, quiet moment of taking the challah. But I was looking at it and thinking it's really like a fist, and I just feel so angry. So I have my more angry and less angry hafreshat challah.
You were pounding the dough there, I think. And I
Yeah.
think we all feel that sense of anger that we don't know where to, and we don't know where to put it. And I think that these are the beautiful expressions of how you can create something beautiful out of something ugly. So this is another aspect or an approach to a part of a woman's life in Judaism. Talk about the woman in the water.
So these mean, it was a struggle. I thought a lot about this, but because Nida is a family purity ritual that some women observe, and then if you don't observe it necessarily for your physical self, people also use it to the dunking for your dishes and your glassware and your silverware and for purity. The sofer, the person who writes a Torah or a scribe, will go into the mikvah before they do that. For adoptions, people will go in, or for conversion ceremonies, people go in the water. The water is a beautiful metaphor, and but I was thinking about a woman's life, and I was thinking about how, for those who observe the nida, it's really to encourage family building. So I wanted to show the strength of it for women, that, going in the water is also about bringing out the next generation.
Very, very beautiful, very fluid. I'm gonna, I'm going to move.
Good
I'm going
poem,
to show
very
this
poem.
piece. Yes, it is. And I'm going to show this beautiful, joyous piece, but I want to move past it because I want to make sure I get to the three-dimensional works that you do. So let's talk for a minute about Tikkun Olam. Here's a reference I know. Talk a bit about this because it's quite arresting.
Yeah, as I've said, words are a stimulus for me, and the phrase like a rip in the fabric of the world is echoes in my head a lot during these difficult, crazy times. And so this is my depiction of women trying to make a repair. So there's the mother protecting her child, and all the little hands trying to sew up the tear, and the monster on the other side. And I'll just say, we hope I'm not going on too long, but that one of the things I like to do is take the miniatures, like this monster. There's something similar to that I've seen that was maybe this big in a little illustration. I like to like blow them up and give them more meaning or visibility.
You certainly is a powerful piece and kind of scary. And here's another one that there you are with your scissors, Karen.
I know
People
they're
must
always
they
there.
must back away from you holding the scissors. But there's also a golden scissors here. Are we trying to repair the world in this one as well by sewing it, repairing the rip?
It's it. This one is a little more about it's out of control. The rip is there's less control here in this one. So yeah, it's a compliment to the other piece.
So tell us about three-dimensional pieces that you've got here. What made you decide to do this? And basically, how did you do it?
So this is inspired by Eshet Chayil, the proverb of woman of valor. Um, and I don't know. I had this box. I'm sure it had been my father's. He was always repairing and restoring clocks, and there was no clock, and there was just this lovely box, and it just looked like a house to me. And I needed to put her in there. And there's the part that says, "Let her deeds praise her in the gates," and it just seemed to work. So how did I do this? I painted on the box. I made the little figurine out of paper and sewed her clothes. A friend of mine had given me her childhood Torah that was, they gave out in, elementary level religious school. So I felt she needed to wrap herself in it. That just made sense to me. Um, there's a photograph so that you can see this in the side images. There's like a hands. That's from a photograph I took a long time ago, very long time ago, of a very, very old woman. And I made it's a process where you can take the ink from a Xerox and embed it into gelatin, and then it's like see through, so it looks like film,
Oh,
and that's what I put on there. And I have that here also. Good, glad you moved forward. The hands,
that's
those are
good.
same situation there.
Okay. And so lastly, we're going to look at this box where you have embedded some very interesting things. What is this? And it looks like a book that opens.
Well, it's a box with the segments that sort of represent the life cycle, not necessarily in order. But yeah, that's what I was interested in. The eggs, the impression that we leave behind, the sewn up shroud, and the emerging body. And it's a bloody mess.
It's a little scary, but at least, but on the outside of the
We
box
have
is
the
very
joy, the
peaceful.
joy of childhood, that
That's
freedom.
fun. And the inside is more of the texture of life.
Yeah.
So now we're looking at you in your studio. And what are you holding?
That's a so that's a tar gel. It's a medium that Golden makes that you can kind of make into like little filmy things. And that was something I made to see if it was going to work on the window of the little house. It's the shin shape all around.
So I want to say that we have come to a time where I could ask you some questions. And I want to, first of all, I'm going to move on to another screen that has, while we're talking the questions, has some smaller works of yours. And some of them look like drawings, some of them have collage. Talk to me about what these are.
Um, so these are mostly some collage, some are remnants from a project that I did with printing and embossing. And they were pieces left over that I made into these little studies or these little, they're actually like little prayers because they're little pieces of the prayers from Fanny Nuda. And um, they just really made me happy to make them. And they're quite small and shall I say my intention here?
Yes, do your intention.
So my intention is that if people are interested and now or in the future, they will be for sale. They are, and I will donate all the income from those pieces to Bring Them Home Now, the organization that helps families and recovering from the trauma of October 7th and families who are hoping to get their loved ones back.
So I'm going to let people leave this slide up when I ask you. I have many questions for you. And Karin, I know, will be posting in the chat ways that people can reach you. But just for fun, before we leave these and take the questions, what size are these?
They range from like 6 by 8 inches to 10 by 6. And if someone really needs to know exactly, you can message me and I'll tell you.
Okay. I also seems that they're on a background. Are they mounted or is it just the piece of the art piece itself?
I photographed them on black
Okay.
cardboard. So now they'll just be as they are.
So I'm going to ask you some questions that people posed. One question did have to do with size. Like what size, that question is, what size are most of your collages?
Um, they vary, but some of them are quite large, like 36 by 24 is not an unusual size.
That is
Um,
a big piece.
yeah. And lots of, either if you're really interested to know the sizes, I think on my website it says what all the sizes are. And if you're really interested, just message me and I'll tell you specifically. But they are rather large. These are very small. These are very small little pieces. Yeah, even my my book of hours they're not this big. They're this big.
So would you say, did you say in your book of hours they're this big or
They're large.
they're
They're the
large?
36 by 24 or they're,
So typically, how long does it take you to make a 36 by 24? Because there's so many steps in your process.
oh, I don't know. It depends if I'm working on it every single day. I mean, I could say it could take a month. Sometimes I get halfway through a work and then I have to not look at it for a while and I work on something else. So like the cumulative amount of time, I don't know, like maybe it's only a month and a half, but sometimes I'm a month in and I'm like, oh, I can't look at this anymore. I need to do something else and come back to it later. So, but a lot of those works were done within a year. So I can work fast if I'm undistracted.
Someone's asked if you could speak more about your process. Do you sketch out the illustration? After cutting and pasting paper to create the work, it looks like you are drawing or painting on top.
Yes. So often I have a compositional idea. And I do sometimes like just draw lines on my papers to kind of remind me where I'm going, but I don't always stick with it. I do try to do like a ground first, some kind of background. Um, and then sometimes it doesn't work, and then I have to like rearrange it. And then it's a lot of on top. And then I'll do drawing and painting or cutting and more shapes on top. And then if I hate it, I'll put more paint and paper on top and start over again. So it's a lot of letting go.
So I'm going to ask you a question about the layering because someone has asked how many layers of paper are there typically in a piece? How do you prevent the paper from curling? Because you obviously going to have a lot of glue happening. Does that happen to you? Does the paper curl or rumple?
Sometimes it does, and I'm usually incorporate that into I'm okay with that. I feel like it expresses the imperfection of the process. That it's not that collage for me, it doesn't have to be all smooth and neat. But I guess I don't put too much glue or I smooth it out or I keep it pinned down on the wall. And sometimes you have to flatten it under some heavy objects later.
Okay, so you could come into your studio. First of all, I have a thought about coming in your studio and sneezing and on a collage that has just been laid down and having it blow away. Has that ever happened to you?
No,
Did you
it's a very
sneeze?
wet and sticky process. It's a very sticky process. I constantly am putting glue. There's glue underneath and glue on top. There's lots of glue all the time. The glue is the acrylic gel medium. So no, it doesn't blow away. And if it blows away, then it wasn't right. It needs to
Okay,
be
all right.
something else. No, I don't plan it all out. It's not like a puzzle where the pieces all fit. It's more like backwards than
It's
that.
a spontaneous kind of explosion of Karen's mind. That, that's what I can think of. And that's a good thing. I have a question here about Chagall's work. Someone has noted that the images and colors remind me of Chagall's work. Also, Faith Ringgold's story quilts. Do either of those resonate with you?
I love them. I loved her work. Her quilts were so beautiful. They are so beautiful. I'm saying the past tense because she's no longer here. And I love Chagall. I loved his flying figures. It gave me the confidence to have my figures flying in the air sometimes too. So, yes, I love all those. And thank you for thinking of them.
Okay. So I think that we've come to the place where I could thank you so much for being a part of our show. We are so honored to have you. I know that everyone was blown away by your work, and I haven't even looked at the chat, but I'm pretty sure that you have made an impression, and I'm so grateful that I got to spend so much time with you. So thank you for on behalf of the American Guild of Judaic Arts and Art and Scroll Studio.
Thank you, Shelley. I feel like I'm getting the Academy Award, so I feel like I have to thank so many people now. And then I feel like Sally Fields, you really do like me.
Me too.
Um, but I do want to thank the American Guild of Judaic Art. I want to thank the Jewish Art Salon. And there are people I want to thank besides my mentor, Debbie Pendel, who set me free. I want to thank people who've given me the opportunity to show my work, my cousin, Ron Rosenstock, and Nancy Greenberg, who runs the Jewish Community Center Art Gallery in Worcester, Mass., and Amy Levine Kennedy, who gave me a beautiful show in Westchester, New York, and Cynthia Beth Rubin, who's a congregation member of mine who's on the Jewish Art Salon board, who also gave me the first show I had at my synagogue. Um, and my friend Linda Zucker, who was my COVID art buddy, who definitely helped me stay on track and keep my work going forward. And my husband, who's believed in me all along.
That's a lovely list. And it's so nice to know that you have such a loving community. And I can certainly understand it, having had the pleasure of spending time with you. And, you
Well,
know,
thank you, Shelley. You made it easy.